Let's talk about setting boundaries with emotionally immature parents. So an emotionally immature parent is somebody that generally lacks self-awareness and empathy. So they're really not able to kind of understand your inner world and understand your emotions, understand your perspective. And you probably grew up with them in a similar state, and maybe they've just really not been able to change during their lifetime. And normally emotional immaturity stems from their own childhood, their own trauma that they haven't been able to address or make sense of. And so they're probably really stuck in these patterns and coping strategies and ways of relating to other people and ways of relating to you that create quite significant barriers. So this can also mean that boundaries become more and more important as time goes on. It's incredibly difficult for children to set boundaries with their emotionally immature parents because, of course, as a child or as an adolescent, you were dependent on them. You needed them to want to connect with you, to want to care for you. You also needed to maximize on whatever kind of love or care or contact they were able to offer, and you needed to maintain that. That was really, really important for your survival and your development as a child. So that all makes it really complex to set boundaries. And then when we're adults, it actually feels just as complex. Not because it is, in reality, we can think about boundaries and we can recognize that they are the way that we maintain relationships. We need boundaries, and all healthy relationship boundaries exist. Some are spoken, some are more unspoken, but they're just a normal part of any relationship. But somehow with this child and emotionally immature parent dynamic, boundaries become something really quite frightening, quite difficult, quite overwhelming, and ultimately something that feels very foreign and difficult to kind of work into the relationship naturally. So let's have a think about how this might play out and what you can do. So if the fact that you're watching this video tells me that your parents, you've probably tried to set boundaries at some point in the past, probably in various occasions, and it's not gone that well. Perhaps your parent has reacted by seeming really wounded, feeling really offended, seeming as if you've really hurt them in some way. Maybe they've gotten angry. Maybe they just have kind of ignored it, completely dismissed it, and left you feeling quite powerless or maybe quite kind of helpless. So first of all, I just want to validate how difficult it really is, because really what's happening is you're not setting this boundary, or it feels as if you're not setting this boundary as yourself, as maybe a competent adult, maybe an adult who, has a good life in many ways, who is able to set boundaries in other relationships. Actually, what's happening is you're kind of showing up with your inner child quite activated because it's your parent. So that dynamic that started all those years ago, that's really what is being reenacted. That's what's being kind of activated. And so it makes it really, really difficult. Now, what we need to do, therefore, is to help you kind of shift away from that maybe wounded inner child, maybe inner child that's in need of their parents to approve of them, maybe that inner child that is mortified at the thought of upsetting their parent. Instead, we need to kind of move you across into your adult self who is actually perfectly capable of saying no, saying we're not going to be able to see you that day, perfectly capable of being able to sometimes upset people, because that's sometimes what happens in relationships. As we know, in all adult relationships, sometimes, we're going to say or do something that hurts somebody, that upsets somebody. That might not be deliberate, that may not be our aim, but that is sometimes the outcome of adult relationships. And we also can know as your adult self, you could know that that passes and that other people are ultimately responsible for their own emotions and for managing their own emotions. So we need to kind of help you move across into that part of you, because that exists as well. It might feel like it disappears when you're with that particular parent or maybe with both, but it still exists. So it's about kind of trying to reconnect, or trying to connect rather, with your more competent adult self rather than that wounded inner child. And part of that, well, once you do that, you'll find that a lot of the communication around setting the boundary will hopefully become kind of quite supportive to you. So what I mean by that is that, one thing that can really get in the way of setting boundaries is over-explaining. And if we think of over-explaining, this is really our attempt at regulating other people. When we're explaining ourselves over and over again in different ways, in different forms, we're trying to get that person to understand us, and we're trying to regulate them into a state that isn't either anger or feeling hurt, feeling rejected. We're trying to get them to understand so that they don't feel upset with us. And this is quite a childlike state. This is something that we do as children and that we don't need to do as adults anymore. So again, if you move yourself into your adult self a bit more when you're setting these boundaries, when you're having this relationship with your parent, then naturally you'll probably notice yourself not over-explaining much. And the core thing, I think, to really remember about boundaries is that a boundary is not reliant on the other person agreeing. This is not about their response or reaction at all. Of course, we're human, and therefore we are sensitive to what other people might think of us and how they might react to us. Of course, that makes sense. But that isn't really what boundaries are about. A boundary is coming from your side. We'll be there at 11, not at 9, because we can't get there for 9. And okay, you're going to feel upset about that, but that's the boundary. That's what I'm saying. Whether that person says that's okay or not is not relevant. But of course, it can feel like that because we've had this dynamic with our parent in which, of course, we've been looking for approval. We've been looking and checking that they think that it's okay and they kind of give us a thumbs up. But we don't need that thumbs up anymore. As an adult, you don't need that anymore. So this has been less about the kind of, I'm not so much into scripts and specifically what to say and how to say it. This is more about moving from an energy of your competent, safe, grounded adult self and communicating whatever you need to communicate to your parent and letting them have whatever reaction they need to have. And you knowing that you will ultimately be able to recover from that reaction, from that interaction, from that experience. And you can also learn a lot from how your parent reacts to your boundaries. And ultimately, boundaries it's not about shutting something down or pushing somebody out. A boundary is about maintaining a relationship. It's about saying, these are the parameters that I need in order to feel safe in this relationship. And I hope that has been helpful for you. And I will do another video on this in the future. Take care.